Scientific and Technical Research, or CONICET, at the National University of Mar del Plata in Argentina. His research focuses on human, social, and institutional processes underlying land use change in rural landscapes. And the other co-chair is Joana Lado, who's a researcher at the National Institute of Agricultural Research from Salto, Uruguay. And she is an agronomist focusing on fruit quality and post-harvest. So, Matthias, if you'd like to kick off the session. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Okay, well, we have to break the ice. So with Joana, we will be sharing this session on food security and nutrition. Thanks for the invitation and the presence. So I will provide a little bit of background to this topic. Well, the background is not very promising, but in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have the status of food security is higher than the global average. We have around 40% of food insecurity, moderate and severe food insecurity in Latin America and the Caribbean, which is 10% higher than the global average. In terms of hunger, you can see this graph that shows the trend in this indicator in the region. For example, between 2015 and 2021, the prevalence of hunger increased more in Latin America and the Caribbean than in the rest of the world. You can see it from 2015, and the trend is increasing more rapidly than in the world. For example, in terms of status, in 2021, 56.5 million people in the region were affected by hunger, and this number has grown by 13.2 million since the outbreak of the COVID pandemic in 2019. So these status and trends are unequal in terms of geographic distribution, socioeconomic condition, and also in terms of gender. You can see here that in the world, food insecurity affects more women than men. The disparity in the region is 11.3 percentage points, and it's larger relative to the world, where the gap is 4.3 percentage points. This is important to take into account when we seek for solutions to this problem. So instead of keeping this relatively unpromising trends, we wanted to offer some hope, some optimistic view of this problem. So the question we will address during the great talks we will have in the following is how can we promote continuous availability, equitable access, and reduce food waste while minimizing biodiversity loss. So the three talks that we will present now are focused on ways to use science and scientific research to promote food security and food stability, which Joana will present now.
Thank you, Matthias. Hello, everyone. Well, I just want to share some words in this issue because I think that we have many things to do with science and technology just to change this reality. And we must consider the way we produce and consume food to change the way we do that to build a real and sustainable agroalimentary system, leaving no one behind. A great challenge for all of us as a scientist, with even greater opportunities for science and technology. And how can we contribute to change these numbers, applying science and technology, but also caring our environment? That is very important. One key step should be to reduce losses of food that we have, that are around 50% of the products that we produce are lost during production and consumption. And this is a job for all of us. Nearly 1/3 of the production of the world is lost. And our numbers are amazing. And another point that we should explore as a community is to produce food caring our species, our natural species, and to find a way of coexist with most demanded crops, I say, or agricultural activities. And this is a great challenge for all of us, because caring our diversity will help to reduce the use of fungicides and pesticides that we need to control different pests, and that will increase the safety of our food. So today with Oscar, we will see some examples of how this is really possible and will help to differentiate and to add value to a production of a country such as Uruguay with international chain commercialization like meat, that is very important for our country. And then we also can improve our local crops to sustain demand of food. And with Larissa from Brazil, we're going to see in the example of sweet potato, the tools and the technologies that we have to develop new cultivars that adapt very well to different realities, different soils, and different agroecosystems. And finally, with Aunt Teresa from Jamaica, we're going to see a way of adding value also to products grown by smallholders, by small groups of growers. In the example of coffee, that is a really important crop in Jamaica, with a special participation of women. She works very close to groups of women, and she's going to tell us her experience in that way. So now I'm going to present you our first speaker, that is Oscar Blumeto from INEA, Uruguay. It's a pleasure to present him. He is a scientist who has 55 years experience studying the environmental performance of livestock systems, with a special emphasis on biodiversity and ecosystem services. He is a principal researcher in INEA, Uruguay, and in the recent years, he has conducted research dedicated to developing tools for measuring the integrity of our ecosystems, population of wildlife, and strategies for the farmers to differentiate or value the products derived from systems with a special care for the native ecosystems. As a result of this research, he has numerous scientific publications, chapters of books, and training of undergraduate and graduate students. In his presentation, he will present alternatives for direct interventions and specific actions to conserve biodiversity in productive systems with impacts on environment and social valorization. He will also show us an example of environmental valorization in the context of an international commercial chain, showing how food systems can effectively take care of biodiversity, strengthening the 3 pillars of sustainability: economic, social, and environmental. So I left you with his presentation. Welcome, Oscar.
Sorry. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. This presentation is a big challenge. For many reasons. First, because I'm the first. Secondly, because my survival English with the most pure Uruguayan accent. Third, because most of you works in many different things not related with this. This is another challenge. And the last is because I'm an agronomist talking about biodiversity in Colombia. This is a big challenge. The outline of the presentation is a little overview about global environmental challenges, how to reconcile production system with nature. This is my main job, and show you a case study in the Rio de la Plata grasslands. In this case, with a productive proposal, regenerative livestock producing in Uruguay, and a little comment about how to measure biodiversity, how to integrate assessment in the management of the livestock system, and how to integrate in the value chain. And very, very light, some examples of other production systems that can integrate biodiversity in the production. And the first, when people think about environmental problem, perhaps the first things in the mind is global change. Global change is real, is a problem, is an environmental problem, but it's not the only one. And the greenhouse gas emissions is probably is in the press, is in the nets, is in the social nets. But in the case of agriculture, only 12% of the contribution, all global greenhouse emissions is from this sector. Then, of course, it's important to work in this, but there's many sectors of the economy that are contributing more than agriculture. But if we analyze how we are trying to lead with the planet, we can see that many of the limits of the planet for sustain the life, we are overpassing this. And of course, global change is in this line. But if you see in the biodiversity aspect, we are very far over the limits of the planet. This is our region. Rio de la Plata grasslands is an important grasslands region in the world. The whole Uruguay is included, a big part of Argentina and the south of Brazil. And in this context of this biome, for us, the context of productive systems is that livestock production systems, mainly ruminants, are based on ancestral native grasslands. They are been there by millions of years. The systems are mixed systems, free grazing, combining cattle and sheep. This is the norm. And some time ago, people that was the editors of this book invite us to write a chapter about how to reconcile the design of livestock production system with the preservation of ecosystems. We did this, and now we are trying to go in there because we are trying to do this in the countryside, in the producers, in the farmers, and really to change the realities. And we developed this proposal, regenerative livestock production for Uruguay. There's many ways of focus on livestock production and many ways of focus on regenerative production. Well, we try to give a clear content to this. The proposal is based in two main things. First, a lot of techniques, technological development that we have for producing beef, sheep, cattle in pastoral systems, with the focus on preservation of natural grasslands. The other important thing is co-innovation process. We work with this many years, and it's the way like combine development of technology in academy, but very close to farmers, very close to producers in the field. This is a costful strategy, but is very interesting, the results of this. We combine this and design a proposal that combine many things that are typically used in sustainable development, social and economy, but in this case with a strong focus on environment. And I will talk about the diversity part or biodiversity part of this environment focus. We start a lot of year ago studying many indicators of the production system, but always following international consensus indicators. This is important because of our market. It's in all the world, we are exporters, and we have to use indicators that the world recognize and use. We participate in the development of these guidelines, in the LEAP guidelines that works in the FAO conditions, and we did the road testing of this guideline in some case studies. We do many studies, but now I'm only including the things we are including in livestock production system, that is mapping of ecosystem in each farm. We use an indicator that we developed some years ago, ecosystem integrity index, that let us to know how is this ecosystem, studying structure, species of vegetation, the state of the soil, the state of streams and riparian zone. And we obtain a numeric indicator that we have a global value for all the farm, but also we have value for each paddock or management unit decision. And we can also separate this in the dimensions, structure, species, etc. We also study some communities. We study a lot of kind of groups, spiders, plants, birds, fishes, etc. In this case, we include birds because have many advantages, are more charismatic, easy to see, they sing. This is important for study. And we use a technique that is McKinnon list, and we walk along all the ecosystem of the farms and detect what species are living or in these systems, but not only richness and the diversity index, but we know also how they live, what are the trophic gremies, what they eat, how live, etc. And also we determine in this complete list priority conservation bird species and can eventually have special management for looking for these species. Don't take care with the graphs, are very complicated, but the conceptual thing here is that now we know more about how livestock management affect grasslands, how this management affect the productivity of livestock, but how this state of the grasslands affect the communities of birds. Then now we can take decisions about the management more informed than some years ago. And then I want to show only one example of combination of the practices in the management of livestock production system and the results in environmental indicators. For example, this practice, stocking pillow forage, is thinked by livestock nutrition management, and let's have more resilience. It's like an insurance in the system because of drought, because of any climatic crisis. But if we have a farm with the baseline, environmental baseline, we choose one paddock for doing this management. And we have, of course, increasing in the productivity because we closer the grazing in this paddock, grass start to grow, but this increase the tax of growth also. Not only the accumulation of biomass, but also the productivity, the primary productivity increase. But also this reflects in some indicators like the ecosystem integrity index, because we have an improvement of the structural vegetation, we have an improvement of the covering of the soil, then the risk of erosion go down, and we have an improvement in the structural vegetation of riparian zones and streams, and this is an improvement also for the indicator of the index. Additionally, we create species habitat for some endangered species because they need tall grass and dense grass for nesting. And additionally, we create the condition for improving the soil of the health in terms of fauna, macro mesofauna, and biology, and microbiology, and also increase carbon stock in the soil. We can sequestrate carbon because of applying this management. Then we try to conduce this to an increasing of value in the markets, because this is very important for the economy of farmers and of course for the economy of the country. In this initiative today, the sheep sector is already in some interchange with the global market, but especially with very famous brands, like Gucci. The pilot farms we start now are all of them exporting wool to Gucci, and this farmer, Gabriela, has a recognition of the Sustainable Fashion Award for the work in this ecologically sustainable system. And now this brand, international brand, is going from Nativa to Nativa Regen and increasing the productivity in those kind of systems. But not only the wool sector, also the beef sector now is starting to migrating some brands of high quality meat to Viva Regen, that is a brand where beef come from regenerative systems. We start with these red points, the first pilot farms, and we continue now growing. Now we are in a recently project working well with 126 more farms, and we are waiting for the approval of a new project for work with 100 more. In livestock production system, in our livestock production system, it's a reality. Now we are working with farmers, improving biodiversity conservation, and having more value for the products. But it's also possible for other production systems. For example, dairy. In our case, this is more intensive in terms of use of land. But for example, we can introduce small forest of native trees for shade and shelter for cows, and make a contribution for wildlife because of those trees. Also working the connectivity of forest in river forest in those farms. That is it's a problem in some part of the country because we miss connectivity, but some farms can do it. It try to reconnect the forest along the rivers. And also in more intensive vegetable production system, for example, fruit production system, that now some part of the industry is going to introduce grasslands, polyphytic grasslands between the files of the trees. And in terms of research, we are now researching about wild flora for introducing more diversity in those systems, and probably this will be the next landscape in vineyards in Uruguay. I hope also in other systems. They can also do special areas for conservation, wetland, forest, grassland. For us, it's very important to preserve grasslands, because it's our real Amazonas in our region are grasslands, not forest. Forest is only 5% of the native vegetation. And then, as final consideration, I have to give some key messages. Many environmental challenges must address by the production system. The greenhouse gas emissions are important, but are not the only one. Biodiversity is one of the aspects most impacted globally, at least and the least attended in the production system, and probably outside the production system also. Biodiversity is necessary, is important for the sustainability of the own production system, but also is essentially for us, we need a lot of ecosystem services that depend on biodiversity. Some production systems, for example, extensive pastoral livestock, have greater possibilities, but many of the production systems can combine things, management, knowledge, technology for making contribution to conservation of biodiversity. And the redesign of production system using science as information source, and the valorization of the going deep in the valuation chain of products is really important for having truly sustainable systems, and assure to conserve biodiversity, but also to preserve the way of life of farmers and people that live from production system. A production system of food, but also fibers, like in the example of the woods. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you understand something of the message.
Thank you, Oscar. We are going to have a plenary session after the three speakers to write your questions and make them in that session. Now we are pleased to present Dr. Larissa Vendrame from Embrapa, Brazil. Larissa earned her bachelor's degree in agronomy in 2006 at the Federal University of Goiás in Brazil. He conducted her master and PhD studies in genetics and plant breeding at Luiz Queiroz College of Agriculture, University of Sao Paulo, from 2009 to 2013, with a research focus on soybean breeding and quantitative genetics. She held a sugarcane breeder position at the Centro de Tecnología Canavieira, focuses on germplasm management, hybridization, and breeding population development. Currently, she's a scientist researcher at Embrapa Vegetales, focuses on sweet potato breeding, with the sweet potato as an example of a staple food crop with a great potential for delivering key nutrients to undernourished populations. She would talk about cutting-edge breeding tools and the efforts that are being made by breeders and scientists to accelerate breeding progress, ultimately leading to a more sustainable and accessible crop cultivation in different challenges regions. In Brazil, sweet potato breeding program is validating the existing tools to select clones with precision and release cultivar with shorter cycles to meet the supply chain demands. So, Larissa, you're very welcome.
First of all, I'd like to thank the organization for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here. Well, some of you don't know which means Embrapa. Embrapa is the National Corporation of Research, Agricultural Research. We are spread all over Brazil, and 3 different kinds of units. We have ecological research units, product research units, and basic theme units. So we have Embrapa, Amazon. We have, which is eco-regional research unit, right? Embrapa Pantanal. Since we have different kinds of eco-regional, different kinds of biomes, I normally walk around, so I'm a bit anxious to be only sitting here. Huh? Can I use? Oh, no. Okay. Thank you. I like to move. And I'm here in Federal District in the city of Brasilia. Here's the Embrapa vegetables. And what else would I like to say? And we have rice and beans, maize, soybeans, everything spread all over the country. And this also facilitates the validation of our products. I work with sweet potato breeding, and to validate the clones developed by the program, we use the other units to have more information about each product delivered. Embrapa also have virtual laboratories abroad in USA and Europe to facilitate the collaboration and partnerships. And the public cooperation with a social role, which contributes to ensuring the supply of higher quality and quantity of agri-food products, promoting food security for Brazilian population, conserving Brazilian biomes, natural resources and biodiversity, enabling the rational use of water in agriculture, combine socioeconomic development with environmental conservation, boosting regional development, and promoting the well-being being of the population rural workers. Well, and this is the work we do with sweet potato, and I'll present here the world and Brazil scenarios, sweet potato breeding, crop challenges, and breeding tools developed. I brought these pictures to show you that we have different kinds of producers in Brazil. We have small producers, we have big producers that has a lot of technology, and they have large areas like this one, and with irrigation and mechanization, and small ones with no mechanization and small areas produced. And different kind of sweet potato produced in every region, and specific demands for kinds of sweet potato too. Well, and how is the world scenarios for sweet potato? Even though sweet potato origin is in the middle of America and the north of Latin America, the biggest producer is China, with more than 70% of the world production, okay? You don't see any other Latin American countries here among the biggest producers. Brazil is here in the 14th position. And about the biggest exporters, United States is the biggest sweet potato exporter, mainly to Europe, okay? And Brazil is starting to export sweet potato, and is the 20th position. Well, what about in Brazil? Well, we produce sweet potato in all the country, from north to south, but the biggest producers are the state of São Paulo in the first place. But it really changed in the past 5 years, like it tripled the production. mainly because of the demand for special nutritional diets and for gym workouts. People that work out like to eat sweet potato, and they demand more sweet potato from the market, especially in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. And then after São Paulo, Rio Grande do Sul is the second biggest producer of sweet potato. But it has like been one of the most consumers too for a long time. And then the third place is the state of Ceará. As big regions of Brazil, the Northeast is the biggest consumer of sweet potato, and it's a different kind of consumer. There's small farmers. They consume in the breakfast as the first meal. So really different kind of people or of kind of consumers all over Brazil. Okay, and also the yield is really different among the states. We have high yielding in the state of Paraná, and this is because of the technology used for the production. Okay, and the main exporters are São Paulo, Minas Gerais, São Paulo, and Paraná. Mainly to Uruguay, Argentina, and then Europe. Because Brazil, we can produce sweet potato all year round, but in Uruguay and Argentina, in some periods, they import from Brazil. Okay, and the indicators that we used to produce much more sweet potato in the beginning, 1974, and then we reduced the consumption. But in 2012, this changed, mainly because of the information about the nutritional quality of sweet potato. The demand increased. And so here is, you can see in the production graphic, and this is the yield graphic. We used to had a lower yield. Now it's increasing, and the area too. Well, with all these nutritional characteristics of sweet potato presented, why don't we have a greater investment in crop production and processing technology? It's a hard question to answer, but mainly because we have different kinds of producers and a lot of technology that it's not used by the producers. Well, as I'm a breeder, we use breeding technologies to develop better cultivars and to attend the demands in each production region of Brazil. Okay. Since we have different specialties here in the public, basically we select parents, we generate genetic variability, and we create populations. From this population, we select the best clones with the characteristics, with the traits that we desire, and then we fixate by clonal propagation the best plants. And then this is always working as a cycle. Normally, we don't know how is the sweet potato flower. This is the sweet potato fruit, okay? It's not the root. And this is the dried fruit with the seeds, okay? Just for curiosity. And since we have a short time, I'm gonna explain one of the issues we have in Brazil with nematodes, it is a problem because it lowers the productivity of the crop. It damages the roots, and some of them present cracks on the root. So it's not possible to commercialize. There are three kinds of nematodes from meleidogeny that causes this kind of issues on sweet potato. Well, the North Carolina University has mapped two key tails for resistance to meleidogeny incognita and meleidogeny interlobi, two species of this kind of nematode. But the problem is in sweet potato, which is a polyploid species, an exapolyploid, so we have 6 copies of the genome, you have a great complexity, and it's really harder to study its genomics. This is brought this as an example. This is a study from the North Carolina State University. If you had a diploid here, as it is for maize, you'd have like 3 lines here. One for homozygous AA, 1 line for heterozygous AB, and 1 line for homozygous BB. Since you have 6 genomes, as you can see here, this is the absence of the G. Here you have 1 G, 2 Gs, 3 Gs, 4, 5, and 6. So you have 7 classes in total, okay? And in the mapping of these traits and important traits as the resistance to root knot nematode, you can use the dosage of the alleles on this on each genotype. So you can see in the lines here, each dosage as I showed you here, okay? So now, after these key tails were mapped in North Carolina sweet potato breeding population, we are validating them in the Brazilian sweet potato population. As you can see here, those are the SNPs, is a kind of marker that we are using for the validation. The resistance for nematodes are oligogenic character traits. So you don't have many classes as you do in other traits. Those are quality traits of sweet potato in these other SNPs here. And as you can see, we have a good distribution in this population. And if we finish this study and we find out that it is validated and these markers work in our population, we can select and advance these cycles faster. We normally take about 8 to 10 years to get to a new cultivar. If you use a marker, you can advance and get to it earlier. In the classical breeding, I only know if the genotype is resistant or not to the nematode in the end of the program, because it's really hard to phenotype. And if I use the markers, I can pre-select only the genotypes that are resistant to this nematode. Well, I'll go really fast. Just for example, the other traits that are already being mapped are beta-carotene, starch, and dry matter, which are really important for sweet potato production in Brazil. I was talking earlier with Joanna, Brazil doesn't like the moisture in the sweet potato. We prefer drier sweet potato. If we want to introduce beta-carotene in Brazilian sweet potato production in the undernourished populations, we would have to have this beta-carotene along with dry matter, okay? And also for the industry. As you can see, this is the major processing lines of sweet potato in Brazil, or for ships. I think you have seen here too, I don't know. But we don't have much. We don't process very much. But we need to understand better our genotypes and try to add value to the production, okay? So we are studying flower from anthocyanin, purple flesh sweet potatoes, which are rich in anthocyanins. This is one of the cultivars we released last year. And we also have a research with pigments from sweet potato, which can be used in place of the industrialized pigments, okay? And just one more thing here, show that this is the same cultivar and different kind of process. So the breeding program doesn't work alone. We have a big team of researchers working together. So we have everything, we need to have everything well studied to get the best product to deliver to the market, okay? This is just to show you all the possibilities that and all the opportunities that we can have with sweet potato, different kinds of color combinations and flavors, and it's really, really very beautiful. I'm in love with this, but we have a lot to do to deliver this to the market, okay? We have some partnership with SIP in Peru, with germplasm introduction and technical staff exchange. With INEA, I was trained there by the breeder, so I consider this was a partnership in Latin America. Embrapa is really working with partnerships with many different institutions. So we have a lot of agreements, just to show you we are open for this kind of partnerships. The vision for the future that Embrapa has, so sustainability, adaptation to climate change, digital agriculture, technological intensification, concentration of production, quick changes in consumption and added value, biorevolution, integration of knowledge and technologies, increasing governances and risks. Okay, I'll go fast here. If you want to know about Embrapa and our research, technical reports, you can access here in all this media. And there's the barcode here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Larissa. Very interesting. So now we are pleased to present Dr. Anne Teresa Berthright from Jamaica. Anne Teresa has experience in rural livelihoods, climate change, vulnerability, and adaptation. She has worked with various local and regional multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary projects focused on reducing risk to climate change and improving the livelihoods of rural communities. She has a broad interest in the field of agriculture, with particular emphasis on the challenges and opportunities surrounding rural livelihood development. Welcome, Anne Teresa.
Wow. Thank you so much, Matthias, for the introduction. And thank you to the organizers for the invite to present. I'm grateful for the opportunity. All right, I'll go right into it. Oh, my picture is the slides seem to be messed up there. Never mind. Okay, that's the title of the presentation. So this morning, the presentation will focus on a paper that was published last year with a colleague of mine from the University of North Alabama, looking at modeling the future of Jamaica's coffee under changing climate. And just a brief outline of the presentation. I'll first look at the context of Jamaica's coffee industry and the livelihood characteristics of smallholder coffee farmers, then move on to sharing some of the challenges that the industry face and smallholder farmers face. Then a brief look at the model itself, its findings, and really the meat of the presentation will look at the implications of these findings for coffee livelihoods and communities and the industry, as well as strategies for the future, right? An overall summary. Okay, so Jamaica's specialty coffee industry. Jamaica actually produces less than 0.1% of the global coffee traded in the world. So I know extremely tiny percentage. But as a traditional export crop, coffee is generally grown within the mountainous regions of the central and eastern sections of the island of Jamaica. And there are two main distinct coffee producing zones. You have the Blue Mountain Coffee Zone, which I know a lot of persons may know of the Blue Mountain Coffee. And then you have the non-Blue Mountain Zone, which is also called High Mountain Coffee, right? And the majority of the island's coffee farmers, they're actually located in the Blue Mountain Coffee Zone. So coffee is, one of Jamaica's top 10 export products, but the industry has experienced some decline over the last couple of years. One of the main features of the industry also is that it has undergone deregulation and privatization, where historically the state played a critical role in the development of the island's coffee industry, right? Through the provision of technical support and extension services, farmers used to receive subsidized farm inputs, the provision of social infrastructures, roads, schools, health centers. There used to be a higher investment in research and development and strengthening of cooperative organizations. But since the economy has, taken on some reforms, particularly from international financial agencies, the support for coffee growing communities has somewhat diminished. When you look at smallholder coffee livelihoods now, these farmers, they produce over 85% of the island's coffee. And oftentimes, the age of these farmers, they are very ageable persons. You even have coffee farmers in their 80s that are still plowing the land. So they usually farm on fragmented plots of land, which are around 2 to 3 acres. They usually engage in shade coffee, right? This is mainly for the lower elevation coffee farms. Usually farmers would intercrop bananas and plantains along with their coffee plants, right? So this will give them some sort of income diversification and really add or contribute to household food reserves. It is a male-dominated industry right throughout the coffee value chain, so not just on the farm, right? And the work that women, participate in, you do have some farmers as well as coffee pickers and coffee bean sorters in the factories. But also many of the coffee farmers, women coffee farmers, they do have to manage that double burden of managing the farm as well as responsibilities in the home. Right. So looking at the challenges right now, so despite, producing this prestigious and luxury crop or commodity, Blue Mountain coffee, you have communities in this region where they remain underdeveloped with poor infrastructures, limited technology, and they do experience seasonal food insecurity. And some of the conditions that have really shaped this disabling environment include, the low farm gate prices that farmers receive, expensive farm inputs, limited on-farm technology. So like the use of irrigation is very limited to non-existent. Most of the farms are rain-fed. High maintenance costs of the farms, as well as limited support services. Challenges as it relates to the climate aspect. You have increased temperatures and frequent drought conditions. You have variable and unpredictable rainfall, right? Seasonal changes to the coffee crop calendar, decreased yield, increase in pests and diseases. So a lot of challenges are on the plate. And just stepping back a bit and looking at, climate change as it relates to the major coffee producers, particularly in Latin America. You find that, for example, in even Mexico and Central America, we're looking at the projected impact of climate change. It is going to be like substantial losses are projected in coffee growing areas by 2050, right? And since the 1960s, it is said that temperatures has risen by 1 degree Celsius, and rainfall has declined by 15%, right? When you look at Colombia, right, it is said that it will experience wetter and warmer weather, which, kind of help to facilitate the increase in the coffee leaf rust, which is a disease affecting coffee, right? So you find that the rust is going to higher altitudes because it has become more warmer. In Brazil, it is expected that substantial losses in coffee are projected by 2050. Right, so we're asking the question of, where is Jamaica? What about Jamaica? And looking at the future of Jamaica's climate, we find that climate model projections suggest that Jamaica will continue to experience a warming and drying trend. We'll have more very hot days, more very hot nights. And trust me, I have been experiencing it, right? Increased rainfall variability and a noticeable increase in the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events like droughts and hurricanes. So even given all that projection, there still has not been an assessment of how, these changes can affect coffee growing areas, especially since, Blue Mountain coffee is a high value crop. How will climate change affect the future of this production, and what are the implications for industry stakeholders as well as for smallholder farmers? Right, so to address this knowledge gap, the objective of the research was to model current and future suitability for coffee production on the island over 3 shared socioeconomic pathway scenarios as seen on the slide, and it's for the near, mid, and far future, so 2021, 2040, and so on. And of course, here we look at, you see the parameters used for the model. So these are agroecological parameters, which are extremely important for the growth of the Arabica variety coffee. Right, so here the table shows changes in coffee suitability for each of the scenarios compared to the 2020 base model. And we find that coffee suitability in Jamaica decreased under all of the projected climate change scenarios, mostly by 5 to 10%, right? So for example, on a particular scenario, you'll have like 42% of the island experience a 5 to 10% decline in coffee suitability. Right, so here the maps are showing the differences in suitability under each of the scenarios for the near, mid, and far timescales compared to the initial base period in 2020. Right, so overall the suitability declines. Particularly, it is concentrated in the lower elevation areas of the non-Blue Mountain coffee producing zone, and we find that this finding is very substantial because the high mountain region, sometimes I switch back and forth, the high mountain is the same as non-Blue Mountain. It already operates at a higher temperature levels, right? So here you just find greater decrease or decline in coffee suitability going forward. Now, the implications of these findings, right? We find that as a climate-sensitive crop, coffee plant health actually declines under higher temperatures, causing, yellowing of leaves and physiological abnormalities, especially in key moments of the plant's life cycle. We find that for example, the island, right, is projected to experience significant warming during the late wet season as well as during the dry season. So here we have the crop calendar for the Blue Mountain coffee and the non-Blue Mountain coffee zone. And, for example, we find that in the Blue Mountain coffee zone, you find that the fruit setting stage would be affected, right, by the extreme warming, while in the high mountain zone, you have the pre-flowering stage would be affected by increased warming, right? So you also find that certain agronomic practices used by farmers would also be affected by, these higher temperatures and changes in rainfall patterns. So activities such as planting new coffee seedlings, right? Fertilizing the coffee, applying, chemical applications, all of those depend on, having reliable temperatures and rainfall and seasonal patterns for coffee production, right? So actually, it has been said that, coffee farmers are already experiencing the adverse effects of these impacts. I've interacted with coffee farmers. They've showed me their burnt coffee cherries. They've mentioned that there have been delays in the bearing season and, of course, increase in pests and diseases, the coffee berry borer, the coffee leaf rust. So all of this has caused a disruption in their practices and, of course, has led to some food insecurity. And, with all of this as well, you find that it will affect the quality and quantity of the coffee produced, and even potentially, affect the number of smallholder farmers who will be able to cultivate the crop in the future. Right. So looking at the seasonal food insecurity angle of these findings, and seasonal food insecurity experienced by farmers is really shaped by both climatic and non-climatic forces. For example, the increased temperatures and drought conditions not only result in a light coffee berries, and light coffee meaning that like the bean inside the coffee cherry has been affected, whether it has been dried out or a coffee berry borer went in and damaged the bean. So that will often lead to income losses for the farmer because, the coffee processors would be purchasing less coffee, right? So another implication is that these coffee farmers, they have low coffee prices, or they receive low coffee prices, and sometimes the timing for their payments is very late. So these are also major contributors to the incidence of food insecurity, as these periods of hunger generally occur post-harvest, right, when funds have already been reinvested into the farm, or these periods of hunger may occur pre-harvest when the funds are redirected to, cater to children or other household amenities and everything. So we find that, farmers continuously, they face decisions on managing on-farm requirements, household maintenance, and even, unexpected hardships, as each of these categories, they compete for the limited financial resources that they have. Also drought, extreme events, drought and hurricanes, the recovery period often takes very long, sometimes years. And even with the use of personal savings, if savings are available, right, sometimes the loss in income will lead to poverty and increased vulnerability, particularly given the absence of, risk alleviating schemes like, insurance plans. Right. So considering the challenges, right, all of these challenges, and there are many, coffee producers, they have implemented a variety of adaptation strategies to ensure their survival and also the survival of their households, right? So these range from improving shade management practices, to combat the higher temperatures, even to abandoning their coffee plots, right? Like completely coming out of coffee production and pursuing other alternative livelihood activities such as animal husbandry. Some farmers, of course, they may intercrop subsistence crops, right? So fruits, vegetables, root crops to complement the coffee production. However, at times, these activities, they don't fully compensate farmers' ability to purchase, the necessary standard of farm food staples, right? But there are also, other areas that they would venture into, such as cultivating food crops more tolerant to warmer temperatures. And just giving an example of research done by Zinger et al., right, where they modeled the suitability of some of Jamaica's most important food crops under future climatic conditions and, warmer temperatures. They found that minimal loss to suitability for crops such as bananas, yams, oranges, mango, and sweet potato, which Larissa, you will find interesting. And also these results were also found by Riley et al., where again, sweet potatoes showed an increased suitability under warmer temperatures or warmer scenarios, yes. No, although the model showed a comparatively higher decline in the non-Blue Mountain coffee producing zone, coffee suitability within the high mountain region was also impacted, right? There have already been reports of traditional coffee growing areas, going higher into the mountains, shifting to higher altitudes. And according to a coffee advisory officer at one of the local coffee factories, basically saying that farmers are moving higher up into the mountains. And what they're going to do is cut down the trees, and, this is going to cause landslides and disasters. But also another thing to consider is that at higher elevations within the Blue Mountain regions, we have a UNESCO World Heritage Site, right? So with farmers possibly moving into these areas, it may cause some, contestation, so issues may arise among decision makers and stakeholders within the coffee industry and environmental institutions concerning, whose framing of adaptations take precedence under a new climate regime, right? So do you allow farmers to go higher up into the mountains, jeopardizing, the UNESCO World Heritage Site label? So these are decisions that, they will need to make. And also, for example, a quote from one of the coffee processors where he's saying, what 1 acre of Blue Mountain coffee can do for the Jamaican economy, like 1 acre of pine trees, they can't do anything. So if that's the mindset of this coffee processor, then, it may be a bit challenging if farmers continue to move up further into the hills. So these economically valuable spaces, such as the Blue Mountain producing region, they will become contested under climate change. Right. And continuing on the politics of adaptation, when we consider the local and international prestige of and the value assigned to Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee, we find that like this Blue Mountain coffee space, it has the power to influence decisions, right? So according to another coffee processor, he's saying that Blue Mountain coffee is the Usain Bolt of coffee. And we all know who Usain Bolt is, right? The fastest man alive. So that's the prestige assigned to Blue Mountain coffee. So when you think of this space, right, it provides this Blue Mountain coffee space, it provides a level of security for the industry stakeholders, right? But now climate change is coming in to disrupt this security, right? And on for farm level adaptation measure, one of the responses by farmers that has emerged to combat, the burden of climate change is a growing preference for more robust coffee varieties such as the Arabica geisha, right, and other numbered hybrid coffee varieties. So farmers, they acknowledge that these varieties, the geisha and the numbered varieties, they are highly productive, drought tolerant, disease resistant, and comparatively less costly to cultivate than the Arabica typica variety, right, which is more sensitive to environmental changes, more sensitive to the pest and disease, more sensitive to the increased temperatures. But the representatives of the regulatory body that controls the industry, as well as some of the coffee processors, right, they are against the cultivation of these type of numbered varieties, because they're saying that there isn't a market preference for it, right? The market prefers the Arabica typica variety, regardless if it is comparatively more susceptible to the coffee leaf rust and difficult to maintain, right? So they do have, the idea of protecting the geo-branding status of the Blue Mountain coffee and the taste of the coffee, because there is a comparative advantage, right? So we find that the variety that secures the market for these large coffee processors has really become an insecurity for the livelihoods of smallholder farmers, and it really sheds light on who determines the correct form of adaptation and whose framing should take place, and which pathway should be privileged. I'll just move quickly here, just some quotes of coffee processors. They're saying that the geisha the Arabica geisha coffee has a different taste profile, regardless of it being resistant. So farmers shouldn't invest in that, but the farmers prefer it because it's more resistant and it's providing an income for their household. Right. So just a quick overview on the strategies moving forward. Right. It is said that Jamaica's coffee industry, it remains ill-prepared for the challenges associated with climate change. And of course, this has had like a multiplier effect, of course, affecting food security of coffee farmers. And just a summary of the quote here, where a coffee processor is saying that they acknowledge climate change is happening and the effects that it has been happening on the industry, but there is no plan B. Right. So if no adaptation doesn't take place, then that's it. They don't have a job. In one of the regulatory corporate plan that has been developed, the strategic objectives for climate change adaptation were absent. However, they did have some activities or proposed activities that could benefit farmers under climate change, right? Increased temperatures and so on. So some of those activities include, increasing training for farmers and increasing research for more resilient coffee varieties that suits the taste of the market and of the regulators and of the coffee processors, right? And of course, more developing action plan for pest and disease management. So wrapping up some of the recommended strategies for the future, where we find that, irrigation systems and greenhouse technology may be possible options, as water supply is key to maintaining coffee bean quality. However, the high costs of these technologies are likely to exclude smallholder farmers. So there needs to be strategies in place to increase access to on-farm technology. And of course, developing a holistic climate change action plan or adaptation strategy specifically for the industry, by engaging stakeholders at multiple points in the value chain, addressing on the line. 1 more minute. Yes, I'm wrapping up. This is the last. Yes, multiple points of the value chain, addressing, underlying institutional and socioeconomic barriers. So being more holistic in their plan. And of course, investing in research and the gender dynamics of the industry. And, we find that looking at the gender dynamics, the contribution of rural women is extremely important. And, you know, in the coffee space, it often goes unnoticed, right? Generally, countries that produce coffee, they do have wider gender gaps. And of course, the Jamaica Women in Coffee, which is the local chapter for the International Women's Coffee Alliance, we focus on building the capacity of women in the coffee space so that they can participate fully within the coffee value chain. And this is just a wrap up of how, you know, agriculture still remains very important for the sector and for food security. You know, the decrease in coffee suitability is significant and it carries extreme implications, right? And there are certain approaches that we need to take, shift from being fragmented to being more holistic, invest in research and gender dynamic, you know, research and gender disparities, increasing research in that area, and of course developing assessment and plans that takes into account gender and creating an overall enabling environment for the industry. That is it for me. Thank you so much.
Okay. Hello. Hello. Okay, now we invite our speakers to join us and all of you to make questions, comments, to discuss their presentation of any other things you want to tell us. Okay.
Anyone?
Thank you. I had a question on those sweet potatoes that you can genotype and predict which would be like more susceptible to the nematodes. Is there a way to compromise this with conserving genetic diversity of the sweet potato, maybe still cultivating the susceptible genotypes in other regions, or how would you compromise with conserving genetic diversity?
Thank you for the question. In the beginning of the sweet potato breeding program, we always try to have some parents with different background so we can represent the genetic variability, okay? So you won't be losing the genetic variability. And we also have the conservation of germplasm banks of sweet potato. In Embrapa, we have one, and also in the SIP that I showed you in Peru. And we are concerned with that. And we also try to maintain the sweet potato planted by the growers in different regions of Brazil. And they also ask us to clean from viruses, which are a big issue in sweet potato. Of course, I couldn't speak about every issue, but yes, we're looking and conscious about that. Okay.
Thank you so much for the presentation. It's clear to me that the alert about how important it is to recognize the food insecurity as one of the main strengths from the climate change is something that each of you have been working really hard on it. But my question is about, in Uruguay, you convince your government to invest in your project and finally scale up. In Brazil, you do the same with the sweet potatoes. In Jamaica, you're actually calling the social conversation about these problems. So what would be the main lessons from you as a scientist collaborating with the government to actually pick their attention about these huge threats about food security as the main issue, as one of the first impacts of the climate crisis?
Start. Well, it's a big question, but I think in our case, in our example, the main issues is to be very close to the producers, because you catch the needs for moving the systems and produce changes in this. And also in those cases, we have a lack, because we were close to the industry, the final market. It's not easy in exporters countries, but here in the livestock production world appear some brands that want to be closer to the production systems. This is the clue, is the key point for the exit. Keep closer the producer to the consumer. I have to reduce this distance.
Actually, sweet potato, among all other crops I showed in the map from Brazil, is not a crop that receives a great amount of money for research. It's really different from soybeans, from maize and beans, and so we always seeking for resources, and not all projects we have availability of money to develop. We try to develop a project about water deficiency and selection of clones with resistance to water deficiency, but we couldn't have any money for that. And it is a big issue in Brazil. From north to south, we have issues with water availability, and rainy seasons that doesn't work but why it used in the past. So we are concerned about that, and we are trying to get in touch with producers and try to get more money from deputies and everything, but it's not easy. We're always need to seek the money and to seek producers and the industry, and we can't stop. Maybe that's the main way to get a way to research.
One of the things I think we should consider when thinking about food security is take into account like the broader socioeconomic and institutional environment, right? When you look at Jamaica and other, Caribbean states, or, smaller and developing states, having a colonial history, having gone under structural adjustment programs coming from the IMF, a lot of those policies that put in place, they actually affected the institutional infrastructure within the country, right? So in the past, as I mentioned in my presentation, where the government or the state would play a key role in supporting farmers, in supporting rural livelihoods, in supporting domestic production, this has somewhat shifted, right? So hence why that a large part of our food bill is coming from imports, right? And a lot of that stemmed from, past infrastructures and institutions and policies that were put in place, right, that affected rural livelihoods. So definitely that's something that needs to be acknowledged, right? And not to just acknowledge it, but like charting a path forward and how can we improve this? How can we improve the capabilities of our farmers? How can we improve the capability of our local production, right? So of course that includes research. Within the coffee industry, research is very low, right? there's not enough research within the coffee industry as relates to even gender, as relates to food insecurity. That empirical data is not available. And that is what I think is needed: investment in research, investment in the capacity of rural livelihoods, of rural, smallholder farmers to really advance on their production and overall, the industry as a whole. Yeah.
Hello, that's my turn. Thank you for your presentations. Climate predictions suggest more intense and longer drought periods in many areas in the world. What are the proposals for a rational use of water in agriculture? The proposals for a rational use of water in agriculture.
Well, the system that I show are rain-fed systems. Dependence on rain. It's not. It's not a thing. I know. I think nothing is thinking about to use irrigation in those systems. But with the climate change, it's expected to increase the precipitation in our region. Then the drought is a threat because sometimes appears and very hard. Last year we have one very hard, and all phenomena are extreme. But it's not. Today is not a real concern about water in those systems because irrigation is not thinking in the. It's not in the thinking of the authority.
I think breeding is doing a lot for that. Maybe some tolerant varieties to drought, to different conditions. And if you can improve your crops just to be adapted to the less water or any other condition that you have. In sweet potato, you have many examples, but in soy, maize, they are different. And don't think about transgenic things. Just you can use biodiversity just to generate that, and you can choose from them the best adapted to your condition. That is how in sweet potato or tomato or other crops we make breeding also, like in Uruguay, in Brazil, and then you can choose the best option and see how it yield, how it adapt, and how it works for your growers and your pests and local diseases, all that. Then I think breeding has also the answer for his question about hunger. We have a great potential there with using our best species adapted to the best conditions. And there is an example in Africa with a sweet potato, the orange one, that is growing, and they are now having a good source of beta carotene to help with that undernourished population. So I think breeding has a lot to help with solving that issue, hunger and water use also. Sorry, but because
Just one more thing besides breeding, also different kinds of production systems like no tillage and different kinds of production sequences of crops along different regions. You can use better the water and the nutrients from the soil with a better production system. And just to complement, in sweet potato we have great genetic biodiversity, variability, and we can see the difference of behavior among the clones. So we can select better performance crops, better performance clones, sweet potato clones. So it would be more resilient, even though sweet potato is a resilient crop. As Anna said, it is a good crop option for warmer climate, but you have different kind of clones, and you need to choose the best ones for those kind of challenges we'll be facing ahead. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for the coffee industry, water is extremely important for the growth of the crop. And as I mentioned, majority of our farms, particularly for smallholder coffee farmers, they rely on rainfall. They're rain-fed farms. So the question is, like, what will happen with increased temperatures, right, and drought conditions? And I think that's why at the local level, some of the farmers, they have been switching to a more resilient coffee variety, right, which is kind of against the mandate and the requirements of these coffee processors and the regulators of the industry. By the end of the day, farmers have to do what's best for their household, right, for their families. So if they find that a particular variety is more susceptible to increased temperatures, more susceptible to pests and disease and these drought conditions, then they would not want to invest in that particular variety, particularly if they are not receiving support, right? Support services, whether in terms of advisory services or resources to invest into the farm. So generally, they are going to more of the robust coffee varieties. And what is needed then is for the industry stakeholders, the researchers, to really, take the bull by the horn, as I would say, and invest in the research of varieties that is suitable to the market, but also beneficial to the farmers. So it can't be, benefiting the coffee processors, but the farmers are struggling and they can't feed their families, can't send their children to school. Like it shouldn't be a choice, right? There should be benefits on both sides. So that's why I think all voices within the coffee chain should be, at the table and contribute in advancing these adaptation measures, not just a particular stakeholder saying, you need to do this, this is what you need to do to adapt. There should be an inclusion of all voices. Yeah.
Yes, I have a question for Oscar. And could you explain a little bit more about the ecological integrity index you presented? I would be especially interested in the riparian part and also on the integration of soil, riparian, and the, let's say, more traditional biodiversity data. Thank you.
Thank you by the question. It's an index we developed some years ago, thinking about how to reflect the state of ecosystems under management, under livestock management. And we include 4 dimensions. The 4 dimensions have the same weight in the evaluation. The structure of the vegetation is one of them. For this evaluation, we have a reference of what kind of vegetation we expect in this part of the country, in this region. The second is species. Species is in terms of range of species in several structs. 3 structs in herbaceous plants, 2 structs in shrubs, and 1 in trees. The third is soils in terms of real erosions, evidence of erosion, and potential of erosions, covering of the soil, trampling, and other signs of impacts in soils. And the fourth is the state of streams, the stream itself and the riparian zone, and we analyze also the structure of vegetation, species, and the state of the soil surrounding the course and inside the course. Then with these 4 dimensions, we built the final results. Of course, in some paddocks, we don't have streams. In these cases, the index only is built with the 3 first dimensions.
It's a pity, but we have time for one more question, and then you can continue outside if you want.
I have a question for Oscar. in general, in the country, what is more used to feed livestock, native flora or foreign flora?
In general, the nutrition of ruminants is around 80% native grasslands and 20% seeded pastures, exotic flora. In sheep, near 100% of native grasslands. In cattle, is the final part of the fattening is more intensive and use pastures with exotic flora.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Matthias, and all of you. And see you in the next session.